If you're watching this, hit that like button, drop a comment on whether you'd fight back or surrender, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where humanity refuses to kneel. Now, imagine this. The stars go dark and a voice not human tells the entire world to bow. The first message came without warning. One moment the night sky shimmered with familiar constellations, the next it was blotted out by a shape too vast for the mind to accept. Across the globe, telescopes strained, governments scrambled, and billions of ordinary people stopped what they were doing to look upward. Hanging in low orbit was a fleet so enormous that the Earth itself seemed small beside it. Dreadnoughts with hulls like mountains eclipsed the moonlight. Fighters swarmed in formations so precise they looked mechanical. And then came the voice. Every screen on Earth, every radio frequency, every satellite transmission bent to it. A deep resonance, neither male nor female, carried words in perfect translation. This world is claimed. You are defeated before you resist. Kneel, surrender and live as vassals, or defy us and be erased. Silence followed. A silence thicker than war drums. Families huddled around televisions, their faces pale in the flickering light. News anchors stammered, struggling to maintain composure while cities boiled in panic. The United Nations Security Council convened in emergency session, ambassadors shouting over one another while the threat hung over them like a guillotine. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for negotiation for time. No one dared suggest outright resistance. On a cracked leather couch in a rundown apartment outside Jacksonville, Florida, one man sat alone watching the broadcast. His hands were calloused, his back straight despite the years and scars carved into it. Captain Nathan Kane, once of the United States Marine Corps, dishonorably discharged for disobedience, stared at the screen with eyes that didn't flicker. Where others saw the end of the world, he saw an invitation. Kane had fought wars in deserts no one cared about, jungles no one remembered, cities that would never rebuild. He had bled for orders he didn't believe in and lost brothers to mistakes that were never admitted. The day he turned his back on the Corps was the day he refused to march his men into certain death for a commander who wanted headlines. They stripped his rank, his pension, and his honor. What they couldn't strip was the loyalty of the men who followed him off the battlefield and the unshakable conviction that some fights were worth the price. The screen showed the alien emissary now, something vaguely humanoid, plated in metal armor that shimmered with iridescent hues. Its face was hidden beneath a mask that revealed only cold eyes. It mocked the world leaders gathered in New York, promising mercy for compliance, annihilation for resistance. The Secretary General stammered a reply, begging for time to confer. The emissary dismissed him like a child. Time has ended. Choose submission or your skies will burn. Kane muted the volume. He didn't need to hear more. The outcome was already written in the shifting eyes of the politicians. They would kneel, sign papers and call it survival. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the locked steel case beneath his coffee table. He hadn't touched it in years, not since the day he swore he was done with wars that weren't his. Inside was everything he swore never to carry again. His phone buzzed. A name lit the cracked screen, Ramirez. Ex-SEAL, partner in more dirty operations than either cared to count, a man who could breathe underwater longer than most people could run. Kane hesitated, then answered. You seeing this? Ramirez's voice was low, urgent, already knowing the answer. Yeah, Kane said. You thinking what I'm thinking? Kane's eyes slid back to the steel case. He exhaled slowly. Yeah. Neither needed to say more. Ramirez hung up. Kane sat back, feeling the weight of inevitability settle across his shoulders. The world was about to surrender without a fight. But not him. Not the men who still believed in something more than survival. Far above, the alien ships adjusted their orbits, blotting out stars one by one. The global news networks counted down to the moment the ultimatum expired. Some prayed. Some rioted. Some drank, deciding not to face the end sober. Kane stood, went to the case and laid his hand on the cool steel. For a moment he closed his eyes. He saw faces, Harris, steady with a rifle even in hellfire, Singh grinning behind his glasses while cracking enemy code, Ramirez reckless and loyal to the last breath. Men who should have died long ago but didn't, because Kane refused to follow bad orders. Men who would follow him still if he called. He flipped the latches. The hiss of released pressure sounded like a whisper from the past. Inside lay a pistol blacker than midnight, a knife honed to a razor edge, a bundle of encrypted comm gear, and an old flag patch burned at the edges. His fingers brushed the patch. The fabric was rough, frayed, scarred like him. He tucked it into his pocket. Outside, thunder rolled, but there were no clouds. It was the sound of alien carriers breaking the atmosphere, flexing their dominance. The ground trembled faintly as if the earth itself shuddered. Kane holstered the pistol, slid the knife into his belt, and stood straighter than he had in years. He turned off the television. The last words he heard from the emissary echoed in the silence. "You are primitives. Kneel or be erased." Kane whispered back, not to the emissary, not to the politicians, not even to Ramirez. Just to himself, steady as a vow. "Not on my watch." The city around him roared in panic, sirens wailing, people rushing to nowhere. But Kane walked out his door with calm, carrying the weight of something heavier than fear. He carried decision. He didn't need approval. He didn't need orders. He didn't even need hope. He only needed the fight. And as the alien fleet blotted out the moon, Nathan Kane stepped into the night, already thinking of who he needed to call, what he needed to steal, and how he would make the first strike. The politicians could bow. The world could tremble. But somewhere between the shadows of his scars and the steel in his chest, a new war had already begun. The call went out quietly, without fanfare, passed through encrypted lines that only men who had lived in shadows knew how to use. Kane never asked who was still alive, he already knew. Men like them didn't retire. They just waited for the next war to come find them. Harris was first to arrive. He showed up at Kane's door with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a sniper rifle broken into neat pieces inside. Tall, lean, with eyes like gunmetal, Harris had the kind of patience that made lesser men nervous. He didn't shake Kane's hand when he walked in. He just nodded once, then set his gear on the table. "So," Harris said, voice flat, "we killing aliens now?" Kane gave the faintest smile. "That's the plan." Ramirez came a few hours later, driving a truck that sounded like it would collapse at any moment. He carried nothing but a dive bag, but Kane knew it was full of explosives. Ramirez grinned when he saw Harris, then clapped Kane on the shoulder hard enough to make his bones creak. "Been too long, hermano. You sure you're not just dragging us into another suicide op?" "Not if we do it right," Kane said. The last to arrive was Singh, the youngest of them, though years of Black Ops work had already carved deep lines around his eyes. He wore glasses cracked at the corner and carried a portable rig slung in a backpack. "You realize," Singh said as he plugged into Kane's ancient router, "that if I even breathe on the alien net, they'll know we're here." "That's why you're the best," Kane said. Singh gave a half smile, fingers already racing across the keyboard. The four men sat in Kane's apartment, the curtains drawn, the only light from laptops and the faint glow of city chaos beyond the windows. Together they looked like ghosts of wars no one remembered. Yet here they were again, preparing for one the entire planet might not survive. On the muted television, the alien emissary addressed the United Nations for the second time. The alien's voice dripped contempt as it described humanity as a primitive species, incapable of self-rule. The alien promised mercy, but only if Earth acknowledged its new overlords. The politicians listened, their faces drained, and Kane could almost hear them folding. Ramirez snorted, shaking his head. "They'll hand us over with a smile. Tell themselves it's for the greater good." "Of course they will," Harris said, his voice calm as ever. "Doesn't mean we have to." Kane watched the alien's shimmering armor on the screen. His jaw clenched. "They're staging from the moon. You saw the scans. It's their forward operating base. Without it, they can't maintain orbital dominance." "Without it," Singh muttered, "they'll just bring more ships." "Maybe," Kane admitted. "But they'll know we can hurt them. They'll know Earth isn't just going to roll over." Harris assembled his rifle, sliding the barrel into place with careful precision. "So, the plan." Kane unfolded a map of lunar topography across the table. The edges were marked in pencil, red circles denoting alien installations. "We infiltrate this facility here. Power relay station. It coordinates shielding across the entire fleet. We shut it down, the fleet bleeds. We plant charges in their reactor, give them something to remember us by." Ramirez grinned wide. "Now you're speaking my language." "It's suicide," Singh said. "Everything's suicide until you survive it," Kane replied. The room fell quiet, each man staring at the map. They had all been on missions like this before, where odds didn't matter, only execution did. They had all buried brothers who hadn't made it back. Yet none of them hesitated. Their loyalty wasn't to flags, not anymore. It was to the man who had refused to waste them when brass demanded bodies for headlines. Kane had earned their lives and they had given them freely. Outside, the city continued its descent into chaos. Sirens screamed. Helicopters thundered overhead. Civilians looted stores, convinced the world was ending. But inside the apartment, the air was calm, purposeful, alive with the tension of men who had chosen their path. Hours passed in planning. Singh cracked alien transmissions, pulling fragments of data that revealed patrol routes and communication nodes. Harris sighted down his rifle, adjusting for lunar gravity even without a target yet. Ramirez crafted makeshift explosives from supplies Kane had hoarded in case the world ever ended. And Kane oversaw it all, a steady presence, the quiet gravity that pulled them together. When dawn broke, pale and cold, Kane rose. "We need transport," he said. Singh pushed his glasses higher. "I've got a line on a shuttle. Black market. Military prototype never decommissioned. Quiet as a whisper if it still works." "Where?" Kane asked. Singh smirked. "Where else? Nevada." It took them the better part of a day to reach the desert airstrip. The world around them seemed frozen in disbelief, caught between denial and terror. Governments argued, churches filled, armies mobilized without orders. But none of it mattered. The alien fleet hung silent in orbit, patient, like a predator watching its prey exhaust itself before the kill. The shuttle sat hidden beneath a tattered canvas in a hangar that smelled of rust and sand. Its frame was angular, built for stealth, its paint dark enough to swallow light. Kane ran his hand along the hull, feeling the cold metal. It had been waiting for them, forgotten by a government too distracted to notice what slipped through its fingers. "Can it fly?" Harris asked. Singh powered the console, wires sparking. Lights blinked alive, soft blue and steady. He grinned. "She'll fly." They loaded gear quickly, each man moving with the efficiency of old habit. Harris checked his rifle one last time. Ramirez packed detonators. Singh secured his rig. Kane strapped himself in, eyes forward. The shuttle lifted off silently, climbing through the thin desert sky, slipping past radar nets that no longer mattered. Below them, Earth sprawled in chaos. Above, the stars were blotted out by alien shadows. The shuttle climbed higher, higher still, until the atmosphere gave way to the black of space. The Earth curved beneath them, fragile and beautiful, already scarred by the looming threat. No one spoke for long minutes. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't fear. It was focus. Finally Ramirez broke it. "You know," he said, grinning at nothing, "this might be the dumbest thing we've ever done." "Not yet," Kane replied, eyes locked on the lunar horizon. "But give it time." The others chuckled softly, the sound sharp in the cramped cabin. It wasn't humor so much as defiance, the laugh of men who had already accepted their deaths and chosen to spit in the face of it anyway. The moon grew larger in the viewport, its surface scarred with fresh alien structures. Towers gleamed, craters bristled with defenses, and a sprawling base pulsed with energy. It looked less like an outpost and more like a fortress. Kane leaned forward, voice calm but iron beneath it. "That's our target." The shuttle dipped, engines whispering as it slid into the dark side of the moon. Shadows swallowed them whole. For a moment, Earth vanished behind lunar rock, leaving only the four of them and the enemy ahead. Harris tightened his grip on his rifle. Singh's fingers hovered over the controls. Ramirez rolled a detonator between his palms like a gambler playing with dice. Kane closed his eyes, steadying his breathing, then opened them with a fire that burned steady and cold. "Remember this," Kane said quietly. "We're not here for medals. We're not here for politics. We're here because if we don't fight, no one will. And if we die, let them remember that Earth didn't bow." The others nodded. The shuttle cut its engines, gliding silently through the void, slipping toward the heart of the alien fortress. The darkness thickened, endless and cold, but inside the cabin the air thrummed with something stronger than fear. It was resolve. The shuttle kissed the lunar surface with a hiss of static, landing in the shadow of a jagged ridge. Dust lifted in slow, pale clouds, drifting lazily in the thin gravity. No words were spoken as Kane unbuckled, his movements measured, deliberate. He checked his sidearm, adjusted the knife at his belt, and gave a single nod. The hatch opened to silence, the kind of silence that pressed against eardrums and reminded men they were very far from home. They moved quickly, black shapes against gray stone, crossing the ridge line toward the glow of the alien facility. Towers of metal spiraled upward, veins of light pulsing across their surfaces, humming with an energy no human engineer could replicate. From a distance it looked like a city, alive, breathing, its architecture strange yet purposeful. Harris led, scope pressed to his eye. His voice came soft over the comms. "Patrol. 4 targets. Humanoid armor, heavy plasma rifles. Can you take them?" Kane asked. "Easily." Harris found his rhythm, his breathing slow, steady, unshaken even by the thin lunar gravity. "One shot, Then another, silent flashes that dropped two of the patrol before the others realized they were under attack. Ramirez was already moving, sliding between rocks, planting a knife in the throat of a third. Kane closed the distance with terrifying calm, slamming the butt of his pistol into the final alien's jaw, sending it sprawling. He finished it with a knife strike that left the dust dark. The squad didn't pause. They dragged the bodies into a crater and pressed onward. Every step carried weight. They weren't just men now, they were the first line of Earth's defiance. The closer they drew to the base, the louder the hum of alien machinery became, a low vibration that rattled bones. Singh crouched near an outcropping, fingers dancing over his portable rig. Strange symbols scrolled across the screen, alien code deciphered by sheer audacity. His brow furrowed in concentration. "Talk to me," Kane said. "They're running layered security. Neural encryption woven through physical access points. But I've got a weakness, ventilation shafts feeding the reactor system. Unshielded. Probably never thought they'd need to protect against something crawling in." Ramirez grinned, tugging a satchel of charges tighter against his chest. "So we crawl." Minutes later they were in the shafts, the walls slick with condensation, the space tight and oppressive. Lunar dust clung to their suits, grinding into joints and filters. Every movement echoed, each scrape magnified until it sounded like thunder. Kane led, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. Behind him, Singh whispered updates, Harris carried his rifle even in the claustrophobic space, and Ramirez hummed softly as if daring the universe to notice them. The shaft opened into a chamber unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. A cavern carved deep into the moon, filled with pulsing conduits that arced like arteries. Energy surged through translucent tubes, casting pale light across the chamber. Alien engineers moved below, tall figures with multi-jointed limbs, their armor shifting like liquid metal. Kane raised his hand. Harris set up position, rifle steady. A single shot cracked the silence, dropping one engineer before the others could react. The chamber erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts tore through the air, scorching stone. Kane dropped into the fray, weaving between conduits, firing with deadly precision. Ramirez lobbed a charge that detonated with a shockwave, scattering aliens like rag dolls. Singh's voice filled the comms, urgent. "Reactor core ahead. That's where we plant the package." They pushed forward, bodies moving with the seamless coordination of men who had fought together for years. Harris provided cover fire, his rifle cracking with each breath. Ramirez set explosives at key junctions, grinning through the chaos. Kane cut a path with brutal efficiency, his knife carving through gaps in alien armor, his pistol barking in short, lethal bursts. Singh kept pace, his rig plugged into conduits, ripping through alien firewalls with the precision of a surgeon. Then the chamber shook. Something massive moved in the shadows. From the far side of the reactor emerged a figure taller than any alien they had yet seen, clad in armor that gleamed with shifting colors. It carried a weapon like a cannon, but it didn't fire immediately. It simply pointed, voice rumbling across the chamber in a language translated automatically into their comms. "Primitives. You dare defile our sanctum?" Kane didn't answer. He charged. The duel was savage, brutal in its simplicity. The alien war leader swung with crushing force, each strike enough to shatter stone. Kane dodged, rolled, countered with his knife, the blade glancing off armor that seemed impenetrable. The alien's cannon discharged once, scorching the ground where Kane had been standing. Heat washed over him, but he pressed forward, closer, too close for the weapon to matter. The alien grabbed him, lifting him effortlessly, claws digging into his armor. Pain flared white, but Kane jammed the knife into the alien's wrist, forcing it to release him. He landed hard, ribs screaming, and drew his pistol. One shot to the visor. Cracked. Another shot, deeper. The alien roared, staggering. Kane leapt, knife plunging beneath the chin, driving upward with every ounce of strength left in him. The blade pierced something vital. The alien collapsed, its cannon clattering to the stone. Kane pulled his knife free, chest heaving, blood soaking into his suit. He spat onto the ground, whispering, "Welcome to Earth." Ramirez clapped a detonator onto the reactor's casing, grinning even as sweat dripped from his brow. "That's one hell of a welcome gift." Singh's rig beeped, data streams cascading. "Charges planted. We need to move. Now." Alarms screamed through the chamber, a shrill alien wail that reverberated through the very stone. Lights shifted from pale blue to crimson. Harris fired one last shot, dropping an alien officer who had nearly flanked them. "Time's up." They ran, sprinting back through the conduits, the shafts, the endless corridors. Behind them the reactor began to overload, energy building in waves that cracked walls and sent sparks flying. Ramirez laughed, the sound wild, unrestrained. Singh cursed, urging them faster. Harris covered every angle, rifle steady even as he ran. Kane pushed them forward, wounded but unyielding, carrying not just their lives but the weight of Earth's defiance. They burst from the shafts into the open lunar night, the alien base trembling beneath them. Dust erupted upward as the ground itself seemed to convulse. Kane shoved them toward the shuttle, barking orders through gritted teeth. Engines roared, the shuttle lifting as the first explosion tore through the facility. The blast was silent in the void, but the shockwave of light was blinding. Towers collapsed, conduits split, and the fortress that had looked invincible only minutes before burned like a dying star. From orbit, alien commanders watched in disbelief as one of their primary bases erupted into ruin. In the shuttle no one spoke at first. Their breathing was heavy, ragged, the silence alive with exhaustion and adrenaline. Singh finally broke it, voice unsteady. "Do you know what we just did?" Kane sat in the pilot's chair, blood seeping into his suit, hands steady on the controls. His eyes burned with something cold and unshakable. "We just told them Earth fights back." The shuttle angled away from the burning wreckage, slipping back into the black. Below, the moon still glowed with the fire of rebellion. Above, the alien fleet shifted in confusion, as if uncertain how to respond to the impossible. And on Earth, in cities and towns where news of the destruction reached trembling lips, a spark caught flame. For the first time since the ultimatum, humanity felt something other than despair. They felt defiance. The alien fleet did not hesitate. Hours after the lunar base went up in fire, the sky over Earth burned. From orbit came lances of light, plasma bolts streaking through atmosphere, boiling oceans and tearing scars across continents. Cities crumbled. Towers fell. Fire consumed neighborhoods where children had been sleeping. Humanity, fragile and unprepared, staggered beneath the weight of an empire's fury. Kane and his men landed in a world transformed. The shuttle touched down on an abandoned airstrip outside New York, the skyline in the distance bleeding flame. Sirens wailed endlessly, joined by the panicked roar of millions trying to flee. Military convoys jammed roads, civilians clutched what little they could carry, and above it all, alien warships hovered like vultures, indifferent and merciless. Inside the shuttle, Ramirez leaned against the hatch, staring at the burning horizon. "Looks like we really pissed them off." "That was the point," Kane said, voice steady though his body screamed from the wounds he'd carried out of the moon. Harris scanned the destruction, his rifle cradled in his arms. "Doesn't matter what we did to the base. They've still got the fleet." "Not for long," Kane replied. He pulled a portable comm unit from his gear and set it on a crate. With Singh's help, they spliced into broadcasting towers that still clung to life despite the bombardment. Kane's voice went out across the shattered planet, cutting through chaos, reaching radios in basements, phones in crumbling apartments, old televisions in gasping hospitals. "This is Captain Nathan Kane. You don't know me but I know you. You've been told to kneel, to surrender, to live as slaves. I'm telling you now, we don't kneel. We don't surrender. They think we're broken but look around you. Look at the fire. We're still here. We're still fighting. Stand up. Stand with me." His words carried on stolen signals, spreading like wildfire. In streets where soldiers had dropped their rifles, men and women picked them back up. In mountain villages where alien patrols stalked, hunters took to the woods with ancient rifles. In cities where despair had been the loudest voice, resistance groups formed in shadows ready to strike. The broadcast gave them not orders but permission to fight back. Singh watched the monitors, awe flickering behind exhaustion. "They're listening. All of them. You've lit the fuse." "It's not a fuse," Kane said. "It's a fire." Alien dropships poured ground forces into cities, armored giants with plasma weapons that carved through tanks like paper. But now they met resistance. Militias ambushed convoys in alleys. Snipers harassed patrols from rooftops. Civilians planted crude explosives in the path of walkers. Every block became a battlefield. Kane led from the front, his squad the spearhead of chaos. In the ruins of Brooklyn, they ambushed a platoon of alien soldiers, Harris picking them off one by one while Ramirez lured them into choke points laced with explosives. Singh hacked alien comms, rerouting their reinforcements into dead zones where resistance fighters waited. Kane himself moved like a shadow, cutting down any who came too close, his knife a constant whisper of defiance. For every street they freed, 10 more burned. For every victory the cost mounted. The aliens retaliated with ruthless precision, glassing blocks, incinerating entire neighborhoods to root out resistance. The squad bled with every step. Kane carried the weight of it all, every scream, every explosion, every man and woman who picked up a rifle because of his words. In one battle near Times Square, Ramirez took a plasma bolt to the chest. The blast sent him sprawling, armor charred, smoke rising from his body. He coughed blood, but his grin never faltered. "Guess this is my exit ticket," he rasped, shoving a detonator into Kane's hand. "Make it count." Before Kane could speak, Ramirez rolled beneath an alien walker and slammed the charge against its undercarriage. The explosion tore the machine apart, toppling it like a giant struck by lightning. Ramirez disappeared in the fire. The squad kept running, his laughter still ringing in their ears even as smoke swallowed him. Hours later, Harris volunteered to cover their retreat after they destroyed a supply convoy. They were cornered in the ruins of a subway station, alien reinforcements closing in. Harris climbed to a platform, set his rifle, and gave a single nod to Kane. "See you on the other side." Kane wanted to argue, but Harris was already firing, each shot precise, deadly, holding back the tide long enough for Kane and Singh to escape. The last Kane saw of him was a silhouette framed by muzzle flashes, unflinching until the aliens overwhelmed him. Back in the shadows, Singh's face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes wet behind his glasses. "We keep losing them." Kane's voice was iron. "We honor them by finishing this." Every loss carved deeper into Kane, but every strike rallied more of humanity. Across continents, resistance cells coordinated. Farmers fought alongside soldiers. Engineers turned factories into makeshift arms plants. Children carried messages through rubble-strewn streets. The world bled, but it refused to kneel. The aliens, for all their overwhelming strength, found themselves mired in a war they hadn't anticipated. They had come expecting submission, not defiance. Their commanders grew desperate, their attacks more brutal, their patience unraveling. Singh intercepted a transmission, his hands shaking as he translated. "They're preparing a final strike. The flagship is moving into low orbit. They're going to glass everything, cities, forests, oceans. They're not here to conquer anymore. They're here to erase." Kane's gaze hardened. "Then we take the flagship." Singh blinked, incredulous. "That ship is a fortress. Thousands of soldiers. Weapons we can't even." "We don't need to conquer it," Kane interrupted. "We just need to kill it." The words fell heavy, final. Singh stared at him, then nodded slowly. "We'll need antimatter charges. Big ones. And away inside." Kane's lips curled into something between a grimace and a smile. "Then that's what we find." He looked out at the night sky where the alien flagship hung like a blade above Earth. Ramirez's laughter echoed faintly in memory, Harris's calm eyes steady even in death. Kane carried them with him, the weight of brothers gone, the fire of billions still standing. He whispered, not for anyone but himself, "You wanted us to kneel. Instead, we're coming for your throat." The decision was made. The path was set. Humanity's last stand would not be on the ground, not in the ruins of its cities, but in the heart of the monster itself. The final transmission from the alien flagship thundered across Earth's comms channels, a voice of metal and malice, declaring that humanity would kneel or burn. But in the silence that followed, there was no answer from governments, no trembling plea from generals, no white flag unfurled across Earth's skies. Instead, there was only the sound of boots scuffing against steel as a single man stepped onto the launch deck of a battered orbital platform, unbound by orders, unchained from hierarchy, a marine with no chain of command. Reyes strapped himself into the cockpit of the stolen strike vessel, his hands steady as the entire Earth seemed to hold its breath. Below him, cities prepared for fire. Above, the alien armada spread across the heavens like a plague of locusts, their hulls bristling with weapons that had humbled empires and silenced civilizations. Yet Reyes's eyes gleamed with something the invaders had not seen in any of their conquests: unyielding defiance. The vessel rumbled to life, its systems patched together with duct tape, jury-rigged circuits, and the stubborn ingenuity of Earth's engineers. Reyes had spent the last 2 days threading together a suicide plan, and tonight was when it would bear fruit. The alien commander, a being called Vorash, had underestimated the sheer chaos that one human could unleash with a combination of stolen intel and blind audacity. Reyes smiled grimly. If Earth was going down, he would make sure it burned brighter than any world they had ever tried to conquer. He punched the ignition. The strike vessel tore into the void, breaking free of Earth's atmosphere, angling directly toward the heart of the alien fleet. Warnings screamed across his console: target locks, incoming salvos, but Reyes weaved through them with the reckless precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. Each maneuver tightened the grip of his destiny. Each near miss felt like a deliberate taunt aimed at the enemy. On the flagship bridge, Vorash leaned forward, mandibles clicking in fury. Reports poured in, their flanking squadrons dismantled by guerrilla strikes, their boarding parties disappearing in the shadows of ruined cities, their supply lines disrupted by sabotage. And at the center of it all, a single human kept appearing as if mocking their every attempt at control. A human soldier with no insignia, no command structure, no leash. To Vorash it was an aberration, an infection of chaos where there should have been order. But to Reyes it was liberation. As he closed in, Reyes activated the experimental payload hidden within the vessel's underbelly. Earth scientists had whispered about it like a myth, a weapon designed not for destruction but for disruption, an electromagnetic storm capable of frying entire fleets in a single cascade. They had never dared use it, fearing what it might do to their own world if miscalculated. Reyes didn't have the luxury of fear. His fingers danced across the controls, arming it. The vessel shuddered, systems flickering as if recoiling from what it was about to unleash. Then a voice crackled across his comm. "Alex. Reyes, it's me. I'm on the city grid. The people, they're watching you." The words hit harder than any alien strike. Reyes had been prepared to die unseen, just another casualty in a war humanity would never record. But to know that eyes were lifted skyward, that voices were holding on to his defiance as their last shred of hope, it changed everything. He felt the weight of billions pressing on his shoulders, not as a burden but as armor. "Tell them," Reyes said, his voice rough, "tell them I'm not surrendering. Not today. Not ever." The alien fleet repositioned, desperate to intercept him. Beams of fire crisscrossed the void, entire destroyers shifting formation to cage his vessel. Yet for every trap, Reyes found an opening, threading his ship through impossible gaps, burning thrusters until the hull nearly tore apart. It wasn't skill alone, it was stubbornness, the kind of refusal to die that had defined humanity since the dawn of fire. At last, he broke through their perimeter, his vessel now a single spark in the shadow of the colossal flagship. He could see its armored spires, its grotesque symbols of dominance etched into its hull. Reyes aimed for its heart. Alarms wailed as the payload reached critical. The vessel's AI croaked warnings about instability, about no chance of survival. Reyes ignored them. He pressed his palm against the console, whispering to the machine like an old comrade. "One last ride, buddy." The comm flickered again. Alex's voice, quiet but steady, "Semper Fi, brother." Reyes laughed, sharp and wild, before slamming the trigger. The universe lit up. The experimental payload erupted, a storm of cascading pulses racing outward like a tidal wave of fire. Alien systems screamed as power grids shattered, weapons went dark and engines sputtered into silence. Across the fleet, ships blinked out of control, drifting like carcasses in orbit. The flagship convulsed under the storm, its shields collapsing, its command systems tearing apart in arcs of blue lightning. Vorash's roar was cut short as the bridge itself was consumed in a flash of energy. From Earth, the sky transformed into a theater of light. Billions watched as the impossible unfolded. The alien fleet, once invincible, now burning in silence, collapsing into debris that streaked like falling stars. The roar of humanity's survival filled the streets, a sound louder than any weapon. In the wreckage's center, Reyes's vessel was gone. No beacon, no return. Only the echo of his sacrifice remained. For a moment, silence gripped Alex. Then his voice carried across the channels, trembling but unbroken. He didn't have orders. He didn't have backup. He didn't need them. He was a Marine and he fought for us all. The word spread like wildfire. Across every city, every bunker, every survivor's shelter, the name Reyes became a rallying cry. Not as a martyr, not as a ghost, but as proof. Proof that humanity could not be tamed, that even in the shadow of extinction, a single unchained spirit could bend the arc of history. And as the smoke of battle faded, the people of Earth rose from their ruins, not as subjects, not as prey, but as the inheritors of a universe that now knew their defiance. The aliens had demanded surrender. Instead, they met a Marine with no chain of command. And the galaxy would never forget it.